for joining us today.
Yeah,
I know you have a little busy schedule, but I'm so glad you made it here.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
I know you all have a busy schedule because I hear midterms are this week, so hopefully you're all crushing it already.
You're here to advise us on our midterms. I'm just kidding.
Happy to help if I can help.
Yeah, so I want to get started with getting to know you a bit better, and then for the audience to know you a bit better. I have a quick question. So if you were to choose, would you be Mauka or Makai?
I don't have a picture of my forest. I have some maile from my forest that we grew. I live in the forest in Kona on the Big Island. So I love the ocean. I paddled in high school and the ocean is beautiful. But I think I'm a mountain girl. I just love, there's something about being able to hide in a forest and just like become one with all these plants that have been here for millions of years. That put a lot of things in perspective for me. And being in the tech industry where everything is always so fast and, you know, flashy and always on, I think being in a forest really just centers me better than any other place I've ever been.
Okay. I have another question for you. So what is your favorite way of killing time when you're not working?
Usually I'm hanging out with my 2.5-year-old. So that's a picture of my baby. Her name is Emiko. She calls herself Coco. And when I'm not working, so I work about 20 hours a week when I can, and not anymore if I can get away with it. And the rest of the time I'm hanging out with her probably in the forest.
Very nice. Yeah. So what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Yeah, that was a hard, when you told me that question, I was like, that's kind of a hard one because I've gotten some good advice from really smart people. But I think the first piece of advice that my dad gave me when I was going away for college was, he said, you can learn something from everybody, how to be or how not to be. But it's your choice to decide who you are and who you want to be based on what your values are and how you want to have an impact in the world. And that stuck with me in college and in my career and with every single person that I meet. And so I hope today when you hear the things that I share about my experience that there are elements of it that you say, oh, that's interesting. Maybe there's something I want to do that's similar, or the opposite. That's not something I ever want to do. And just kind of tucking that away in your book of wisdom so that you can, grow what it means to be you over time.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Yeah, when I first met Sarah, I was really excited because I was like, she's just like me. She's a part of ACM Women. And then you just like building your company from startup. And then I just thought it was amazing. So I'm really glad you're here. And then I'm really glad that you just shared your best advice given to you. So now I want to move on to your career and early inspiration. Could you tell us a little bit more about your college careers and any factors that made you decide that you wanted to study engineering and business?
Yeah, so I grew up here in Pearl City, and I was the kid who always was distracting the rest of the class because I got bored with whatever we were doing, and I had lots of questions. So the insatiable curiosity that I had made me assume, oh, I want to be an engineer, right? I want to build stuff. I want to understand how things work. I can't not know how something works if I really like it. But then 3 years into my schooling, I was like, I'm noticing that all of my business friends get attention and money and scholarships and internships, and all of my engineering friends who have built things and actually have code have no idea how to get attention. So I was like, I think I need to go learn something from the business people. And so I asked the dean of the engineering school, can you please approve me to get a minor, like halfway through my junior year? And she was like, absolutely not. You will never finish those things on time. So unless you want to pay for more schooling, you shouldn't do it. The dean of the business school was like, oh my gosh, an engineering student wants to be in the business school, come on over. So I worked really closely with the school to figure out how do I blend both my major and a minor. And I ended up getting a minor in a business track at the time that was called internet retailing, which is e-commerce, I guess, today. But trying to build a course curriculum that kind of reflected how to do technical things in the business world. And my first internship in college was with Williams-Sonoma, which is like a I had no idea who they were until I worked there, which is like a housewares and a cookware place. And I was the first kind of SEO analyst, like search engine optimization analyst on their team. Of marketing people, basically. And they were like, thank goodness you're here. We have no idea how to do this. Also, Google's over there trying to convince us to pay lots of money for their ads, and we would rather do this organically, so you're going to figure it out. And I was like, never did this before, but let's see what happens. And it was great. You know, it was a perfect blend of this curiosity that I had to understand how do you build something technical, but do it in a way that tells a story to compel people to take action, like buy a new pan or bedding.
That's amazing. I see a lot of familiar faces in here. So I know a lot of these students here are other majors beside business that are actually looking into business as well, just like you, discovering that in your junior year. Myself too. I took an engineering management class last semester, and I was like, wow, there's so many things lacking. Even if I make something in computer science, like, where's the business portion of it? So I really like that you addressed that.
Yeah.
I want to move on to the next question. So what was your experience like being a member of the Association of Computing Machinery of Women, or any additional organizations that you're a part of?
Yeah, that was one of the only clubs I think I was in the engineering school, and it was awesome. They sent me to Grace Hopper. So I think I was a sophomore. They paid for me to fly to this conference where basically I could network and meet other women in the industry. And I was so afraid of networking with anyone because I hadn't done anything in the business school yet. I didn't understand the importance of introducing myself or talking about what I was looking for in a career. And that also was part of the reason that I was like, I need to go and learn how to network properly. And none of my engineering friends know how to do it. And all my business friends, who are also the same age as me, seem to get it. But one of the best things about ACM was kind of the exposure to people early on, so that I could take my dad's advice and see, which of these professional women who they were interviewing in settings like this do I want to be like, and do I want to kind of follow the roles and the careers that they've had, and which of the ones are kind of like, I don't really want to be like that. So that exposure was super helpful.
Okay. So are there any things that you wish you had known when you were in my position, studying tech and business and aiming for a career in a big company?
Yeah. I think as an engineer, or just who I am, I tend to overthink everything. I tend to overanalyze, and there's this concept of breaking down in engineering, breaking down really complex things into their most basic principles, right? And then trying to reassemble them like Legos back into something that's a better solution. And when I was in my junior year, I was applying for internships and all these different things that I thought were the right way to have a career. And a part of that was going into big tech. So I applied for Google and Apple, and Cisco wasn't even on my radar. So actually, that picture of me, the first job I got out of college I was a sales engineer. I was actually sitting in a business class, and a recruiter from Cisco showed up hiring for salespeople. And my professor was like, I have an engineer in my class, please talk to her. And I spent 10 minutes talking to her, and she's like, you would be a really good sales engineer. And I was like, that sounds like an oxymoron. What? I thought engineers were supposed to be down and coding and troubleshooting in the dungeon forever. What do you mean, sales engineer? What does that mean? And she was like, it's somebody who is technical enough to understand how a system is built, but can translate it and communicate it to other people who may not be technical, and help them understand the business value of that technical kind of solution. And so the ability for me to have exposure to Cisco as a big company, right? That wasn't really a company I wanted to work for, but I was like, at least it's a big tech company. And it was a fantastic opportunity. I was in a rotational program learning both kind of the solutions that Cisco had to offer. So they actually trained me and paid for my CCNA and CCNP, which are industry tests. And then the second half of the day, they gave us business consulting and sales training. And I learned how to be a sales engineer. So if I had worked for a small company, there would not nearly be as many resources that were formal in helping me understand that. And then also working for a big company right out of school meant that I could see how a $15 billion organization like Cisco operated from the inside out. I could see how they made decisions, what was important to the business, how they created their own products, which then became really helpful for me when I went into the tech startup world, because then I could take what I knew about an enterprise and translate it into how do we sell to an enterprise? How do we get them to think differently about the problems that they have inside of their organization? But I assumed I would be in big tech forever. I was a Cisco systems engineer here in Honolulu, and a lot of people, that's like the dream job, right? Like you get to work for big tech, you get to be home, you know, you can retire into that career. And I was just like, I want to have a bigger impact. And so I think the advice is follow whatever you're interested by, and don't put so much pressure on yourself to think you should do something because everyone else seems to be doing that. Do the things that you know matter to you. And if they matter to you, you'll find a path for yourself, whatever that is.
That's amazing advice. I learned a lot myself. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about your entrepreneurship journey. So I know how Jasmine mentioned your La Torre consulting and all that, but how did you come up with the idea for your business?
Yeah, so half the time I spend consulting to early stage tech founders. So specifically tech founders who are selling B2B or business to business software as a service. And I do that for about 20 hours a week. And then the other half of the time, I'm working with my husband on our family business, which is all focused on restoring the native forests around our home. And for me, I think the things that I think about in general, not just my business, but in everything I do, is what are the ways that I can have the biggest value and impact to my community, that have meaning for myself, and also are giving back to a place that I love, right? I'm always thinking about purpose and place, and then also how do you drive profit and growth from that so that you can continue to reinvest it. And when I think about La Torre Consulting, I want to take all the things that I've learned from big tech on the continent and invest it back into founders of, so hopefully some of you, right, future founders of Hawaii who are coming up with solutions for our community with technology and different ways and innovative ways of thinking about things. And so again, it's mostly about where can I actually provide unique value and how can I learn more and more as I do it.
Were there any challenges that you've gone through launching your business?
Oh yeah. Every day.
Could you tell us a little more about that?
Maybe one of the things that's fun about and terrifying about being an entrepreneur is kind of this, everybody shares this camaraderie of like, you have to grow or die. Like there's this survivor mentality of week to week at the earliest stages of any venture or new idea. You don't actually know if you're going to make it or not, right? And you're kind of fighting to continue. And so whenever, you know, I think about the week to week of what I have to do, am I still providing value? Are the people who are investing in my time and my ideas, are they still getting kind of an exponential value from the amount of time that I'm spending thinking about these problems? And do we have money to continue doing this? And so I think the background of an engineer applied to revenue allows me to not just create the technical systems that are required to get a business to market and to bring value, but also for myself. Am I still learning all the things that I can learn from lots of different industries and then giving that good advice to the people that I'm advising?
I see. Okay. What is something that people often misunderstand about being a founder, and especially in the tech industry?
Yeah, it's there's so much of yourself that you have to give to be a founder. There's a lot of it beyond just kind of the physical act of, you know, many of them have to fly around the world to share their idea, that they have to be salespeople, that they are the first people to inspire others to believe in their idea, that you can't just be so technical that you build the best solution. You have to also know how to compel people to try it. And that takes a lot of physical and mental and emotional energy. And most of the founders that I know don't spend enough time taking care of themselves first, right? You have to take care of yourself before you can take care of your team and your customers. But it's a very, very demanding job. And so people misunderstand, I think. They think, oh, it looks so glorious, right? Like, oh, this person is cool. They came up with a new idea. They're on all these, videos that I've seen. But the reality is it's exhausting. And you got to take care of yourself.
I see. Thank you. So what are some things that you've helped other new tech founders do? You've mentioned like mental health, but anything else for the business side? Could you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah. I spend most of my time, my title is go-to-market engineer. So thinking about what are all the marketing and the sales and business development things that the earliest kind of technical products need in order to convince new users and buyers to try it. And so that can be things like creating a CRM or a customer kind of relationship management system that helps them understand how do I take better notes and record of what my customers are saying, infusing some of what the product team and the engineers and designers are building with what is the kind of things we're learning from the market. And so taking some of the things that a company has built, bringing it into user meetings or buyer meetings, asking good questions, and then bringing that feedback back to the product team so the product can improve. And then through that process, there's a lot of things you learn about specific words or stories that users and buyers are telling that many times the founding team just never even considered as a use case, right? So a lot of it too is shaping what are the best use cases or industries that we should start with when we develop a new product. Especially products that are very universal and the whole world could use, right? When you are everything to everyone all the time, you are not really built well for anybody. And so it's a sense of focus, I would say, I help founders do on the sales and the marketing and product side, but in a very fast, iterative way, because week to week, things are changing and they're building a product that could be influenced by feedback they got just the week before.
I see. So you mentioned, you're working 20 hours a week, and then are there any sacrifices that you've had to make to be as an entrepreneur, and do you think they were worth it?
Yeah, I think that the world of business and engineering is a world of trade-offs, where you have to assess what are the biggest priorities that I have to, what outcome am I optimizing for, and therefore how does that inform the things that I'm prioritizing and what I do. I think the biggest trade-off is deciding to be here in Hawaii, to live here. I lived in Silicon Valley for a decade when I was in school, and the level of networking and opportunities and convenience of always having people around you is great. But I've made the sacrifice to be here because I want to raise my daughter here, but because I also care about building a system of startups and tech and entrepreneurial kind of a mindset here in Hawaii. Even if that means not getting the fancy jobs and not making as much money. And it's also really nice to not have to work, crazy hours. When you're right down the street from your office, you just are always in this work mode. So it's, two sides of the same coin.
I see. So yeah, I've seen through Zoom. I actually met with Sara, and then I saw her little forest background, and she lives in a very nice place. So yeah, I'm glad you have that. And then I think that's a great sacrifice, to be honest. To live in Hawaii, I'm very grateful too, and I love it here. Okay, well, I want to move on to navigating the tech and work environments. So I know you mentioned being in Silicon Valley, it's all about offices and having to work and thinking about that often. But how did your background in engineering and business help you shape your approach to entrepreneurship? And how can someone like us studying computer science or business prepare for a similar journey?
Yeah, I think, being cross-disciplinary and actually investing in different types of skill sets is really beneficial, no matter what your primary study is, whether that's you are an engineering student and you're interested in business, or you're a business student who's interested in other topics. Leaning into the things that are very meaningful to you that you can't stop thinking about, and trusting your gut that you can do something differently than somebody else who might not have multiple perspectives on that same issue. So I think my advice is, don't think you have to do things the way that everybody else does it, or that people have done it in the past. Especially now, there's so many different tools and technologies that are at our disposal without paying lots of money or having to work at a special company to get access to that stuff. I mean, the lab you folks have here, which is amazing, right? To do 3D printing, to record your own music or podcasts. Use the opportunities that are presented to you, and don't be afraid, to really lean into something that you care about and can't stop thinking about. Even if it's not in your core discipline, surround yourself with other people who are smarter than you at something, and don't be afraid of it. Allow them to help you get better without being intimidated by it, I think. Because the smarter the people are in the room that you're in, you will inherently kind of trend towards how smart they are as an average by just being in their presence. So find smart people, be humble about what they have to teach you, and listen more than you talk. And you will be fine, no matter what you do.
I love that. That's very great advice. I hope everyone can take that advice too.
And I still have to take that advice to myself.
So that applies to all of us. But yeah, so you mentioned all this workplaces and then just being burnout over everything. But how do you see the future of big tech and startups evolving, especially with the growing trend of remote work and being at home, working from home, everything like that?
Yeah, it was an interesting swing of the pendulum during the pandemic, when it was okay to work from home. And actually, that was the thing that brought me back home. I was living in Mountain View, California, and my former CEO, he used to be the head of HR at Google. So he's big on, taking care of his people, making sure that everybody feels safe and comfortable. So during the pandemic, he was like, go home. Everybody stay home, work from home. And I was like, home for me is Hawaiʻi, so I'm gonna go all the way back home. And I got to do that. I worked for his startup. We eventually had an exit, but I worked remotely for 2.5 years and realized it works just as well as me being in person. In many ways, I did more work because I was remote. And I think big tech realized that and then started having more lenient policies. I think it's actually swinging back into having everybody come back into the office, which we've seen in the news. And I think that's going to have interesting effects in big tech. And I hope that it compels people who are working in big tech, who have been in golden handcuffs for a really long time, to say, you know what? I'm good. I like where I live. I'm a really smart person. I'm going to come up with something else and start my own company, so that there's more diversity in the market. So there's more people who are saying, I'm starting my own thing, and I don't need as much capital and money these days because I have other tools at my disposal that I didn't have 10 years ago when I got into the market. So see you later, Google. See you later, Apple. I hope that's what happens. I don't know if it will, but it was enough for me to do my own thing. So hopefully that keeps, the trend keeps going.
So how has burnout and self-care affected you because of the remote work? And then as someone who's both building a business, maintaining a personal life, how would you do that?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah, it's every day. And being a mom, I think mom is the most, I'm so honored to have that title. It's the hardest job I've ever had. And I've had some hard jobs. So it's really about, like I said, taking care of yourself first so that you can take care of other people. And also doing things that you love so much that even when it's really hard and a little shitty, you're like, this is worth it because I love it. I want to solve this problem so bad that even though I'm exhausted, even though I've spent 70 hours this week thinking about it, I still can't go to sleep because I still don't have the answers that I'm looking for. And when you choose to work on problems that have that much meaning for you, you'll figure it out in your own way. And you have to know yourself well enough to know when to stop too, I think, right? Unfortunately, if you're like me, you have to scrape your knee and fall down and get hurt before you're like, okay, I'm not gonna do that again, right? So there have been times in my career where I'm so exhausted and burnt out that I've gotten sick and my body's just putting me on the bench. You're like, okay, if you don't want to tap out, let me just tap you out for you. And that's never good. So knowing yourself well enough to when you're like right about to get there and just calling it and then giving yourself what you need to feel better and then coming back into it in a healthier way after that. I think learning from those experiences is really important.
That's amazing. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I believe mental wellness is like something that people don't really consider, especially as students. We have like jobs, clubs, classes, midterms. There's so many things that we have to consider. So when you were in school, how did you balance all that out before you started working?
Yeah, I had a lot of jobs in school. I mean, Santa Clara is a very expensive school. I went to Santa Clara because my dad played soccer at Santa Clara. So he was a first-gen college student, only went there because he got a good scholarship for soccer. And then I got to go there because he was an alumni. But for everything else I had to pay for, housing and food, and I like a lot of food. You know, I like food. So I was like, I need to get money to have good food. I had like 3 jobs. I was like a RA, I was a student ambassador, I gave tours for the college, and I was also like an editor of the magazine of the school, because I had to pay the bills. Like I had no choice. It was either grow, you know, survive, or get out. And that level of work ethic forced me to have to say what actually matters. You can't do it all. You can only do a certain amount for each thing that you have your foot in the door for. And so what is the minimum viable thing that you have to do to still have a bar of excellence across all those things? And then just let yourself go. Like, don't obsess over the other small details, because you're probably the only person thinking about it. But I think giving yourself that level of discipline in school is important, so that when you do have to go into your career and choose what you will work on and what you will invest your time in, you've learned a little bit more about how to balance competing priorities, because there will be many, many competing priorities once you get out of school.
That's amazing. Okay, I have one bonus question.
Oh,
so what advice would you give to us if we're currently looking for internships or jobs, and then we kind of feel the burnout, but we also feel the need to get a job? So what would you do if you were in our, positions right now?
Never go through the front door is what I tell people when they're looking for jobs. Like there's a lot of postings online, LinkedIn, like, oh, there's this job requisition that opened at this company. If you can, try to network your way into every opportunity you get, right? It's much more likely that if there's 1 spot or 2 spots that are given to people, it's given to the person who other people at the company know and feel comfortable offering that role to. So in any case, if you know somebody or you know somebody who knows somebody, ask for an introduction and lead with curiosity. Don't be like, I saw this job, I want to just say, I'm interested in your organization. I know that, and do your research, I know that you do X, Y, and Z. The reason that's interesting to me is because I do A, B, and C. Can I just learn a little bit more about your job? Can I learn about what you like best about this organization? And ideally, you make them want you. So, show up, be impressive, and ask good questions. And don't just send your resume to like 20 things online. Get to know the companies you're working for by getting to know how they invest in their hires, right? Because it's a two-way street. You can work for a really good company, but if they don't invest in you and help you grow and learn and surround you with mentors who are going to teach you how to do the job really well, you will be set up for failure. So, interview them too. Go in with good questions and make sure that the world that they are creating is one that you can see yourself thriving in.
That's great. I guess it's true that people say interview the interviewers. So even if I were in the interview, I would be interviewing the recruiter, I guess.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good strategy in general, right? I learned that from the guy who used to do all the interviews at Google. He was like, there's a power dynamic going on in any interview, and there's bias involved when people sit down across from each other. There are things they've already assumed about you, right? And don't just allow them to just interrogate and ask questions. Break it up by asking them questions, and most of them will be like, oh, wasn't expecting that. Actually, it's hard to answer questions. Maybe I should be a little less like that to them because they are a human being, right? So like humanize. humanize it, and remember that the person on the other side who's interviewing you has a lot of knowledge about what it means to work there. One of my favorite questions to ask to interviewers after an interview is, what are the behaviors that get rewarded here? Like, what are the things that when somebody does something here at this company, the whole company is like, that is awesome. And I believe that the culture of a place you work at is created by the way that work gets done, what gets tolerated, what's rewarded, what's ignored, right? And knowing those things before you accept a job offer is really important to understand. Do you do the things that are going to get rewarded, or do you do the things that everybody ignores? And you don't want to be in a state where you're being ignored for your good ideas, because you all have good ideas, right? It's just a matter of how the people around you lift you up and hear those ideas and then invest back into them.
Thank you. I believe that concludes my questions for today for you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so just to conclude, so Sara is an advisor at La Torre Consulting, and I hope she gave you good advice. Hopefully your ideas can come to life. And then if you want to network with her after this, we do have Q&As. Yeah. Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah,
and then
thank you.
If we could give a round of applause to Sara. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. And you did a great job, Rena. Thank you so much.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, Kyle, go ahead.
So you said you're a consultant right now.
Yeah.
At what point in your career did you decide you had enough experience to be able to give experience to other people?
That's a good question. So, I feel like there's always this uncomfortable feeling of, do I have something good to say that's worth somebody else listening to and trying, right? I think when I was working at the last tech startup where I was working full time, I had my daughter. And then I noticed that a lot of my friends who I had worked with in previous lives were calling me up, asking me the same questions. How do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? And I was just like, they keep asking me these same questions, and they're listening to what I say, and then they do the things, and it leads to good outcomes. And so I wouldn't say there's an exact science to when you feel like you are, ready to consult on any topic. But the truth is, all of you can probably consult on something today, right? There's something today that people come to you and say, can you help me with this thing? Because you tend to be better or faster or more creative in solving that thing than other people around you. It's just a matter of deciding, okay, I think I can get paid for this, right? Like, how good is the advice? It depends, right? And that was my first thing. It was a good friend of mine who went and worked for a startup. He was the first hire at this startup, and they had just raised a seed round. And he's like, we have money, and nobody knows how to do marketing and sales, so can you help us? And I was like, sure. And I just thought I was going to help him. He's like, and we'll pay you. And I was like, oh, sounds good to me, right? So yeah, just being open to it, that you already have good ideas. You could probably consult on something today. It's just your level of confidence and then also your level of commitment to make sure that your advice gets executed well.
Thank you, Sara. Do we have any more questions? Tim?
Question specifically about sales engineering.
Yeah.
I think it's such an interesting position because it's putting together two skill sets that are often not found in one person. When you first started off to now, do you feel there's been any type of paradigm shift or saturation for sales engineering?
I think that it's actually gotten better and better and better to be a sales engineer, even from when I first started 13 years ago, because more and more in the revenue function, people are starting to realize sales engineers are some of the best secret weapons in the revenue function because of their ability to blend multiple skill sets. And so they're saying, actually, we don't need these other roles that have historically existed in this revenue function, because sales engineers can actually run the entire life cycle of discovery and understanding what are the problems that these users are facing. They know the product, in some cases have built it, so they can answer questions, whether they're technical or business related. And then they can also close deals, right? They understand how to navigate a system of buying decisions, and then can get the whole thing done. So, in a lot of ways, they're collapsing many roles that exist in a sales or revenue function into a sales engineering role. And I had a company call me up a few weeks ago, say, oh, we noticed you have this go-to-market engineering title. We're creating an entire team of just go-to-market engineers and scrapping all the other roles in our sales function. So do you want to come and work with us? And I was like, do I have to move? I don't know if I want to move. But it's interesting to me to hear that that is becoming the norm, that sales engineers are actually taking on more responsibilities in that function than they've ever done before. Yeah.
Gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah. That's a great career.
Okay, yeah, right.
In your sales training, what was like the most pivotal advice you got?
Oh, that's...
What changed your sales strategy?
You know, a lot of it was not jumping to solutioning. It was listening first and asking good questions. And my husband's auntie, actually, so my family, nobody in my family worked in business or in tech. So I didn't have people I was related to who I could watch. But my husband's auntie was a sales engineer for another company. So I asked her for advice before I went to the interview. And she said, you're going to want to just start like blurting out all this technical stuff that you studied ahead of time about their solutions. Don't. Like, just stop yourself. And when they ask you, what do you have to show us today? You ask them, let's start with the problem set you're dealing with. Like, explain to me what you're seeing. And I'll tell you if I have a solution that can address that or if I'm not the right person for you. And so, like, you know, kind of resetting the conversation to not be assume that you have a solution to their problem or assume that you should solve their problem immediately, but first try to understand what problems they're dealing with and actively listening to key words that they're putting in their problems and say to yourself, does my solution genuinely address this problem? If not, be very honest and clear. You said these two things. That's not what we do. So if those are your priorities, I'm not the right person for you. But I know somebody who can solve that problem for you, and I'm gonna give you their information. And just being helpful, like genuinely saying, I can't solve this problem, but I'm gonna help you solve it in a different way, was some of the best advice that Cisco ever taught me about being a salesperson. Everybody thinks they're just pushy. So if you're not, you are already different and worth listening to.
Yeah, thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? Okay.